In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this pretty cool Valentine book envelope. Now, this particular envelope right here, I'm going to give you the directions to do this one, but know that you'll be able to alter using pretty much almost any yarn you want the pattern, and I'll give you instructions on that too. Now, the size that I give you today is going to work beautifully for any size that meets the requirement for a mass market paperback or a traditional trade paperback book. You'll even be able to fit a hardcover book into there just fine. Again, this is another mass market trade book here that happens to be a hardback. And then I just go ahead and I tie my flaps shut just the same. So any book lover in your life who you would like to give a heartfelt gift to, whether it's yourself or somebody else, I personally think would find this book envelope as something completely useful and something that could be recognized as really a thoughtful gift. Let me give a warm welcome to my Weaving Wyrd siblings, Wyrdlings, and just fun people. For those of you who aren't in the know, my name is Sig. I'm a retired tattoo artist turned active fiber artist and crocheter. And here on my channel, you and I get to create a little magic with every knot. So don't forget to hit the subscribe and like buttons. This doesn't cost you anything, but it does help me provide you with regular tutorials featuring original designs, classic patterns, and Lacey motifs. I'm always interested in your feedback, so feel free to leave your comments and questions below. So the fabric of this book sleeve is really quite nice. It's really a lovely texture. It's a subtle knobby texture that's super easy to crochet up. It basically works out to be a 4-row repeat. And then of course this lovely motif, this little heart motif. And this is lovely as well. Now, what I used to create this particular envelope, first off, is going to be a 4-weight yarn. Now, the 4-weight yarn I used for this particular fabric was Patons worsted wool. It's a 4-weight worsted wool. And because this is a book sleeve, for those of you who are a little nervous about using a natural fiber like wool, don't worry about it, because the likelihood of you having to wash this regularly is just not great. Maybe you might wash it once or twice in its lifetime, but unless something really goes wrong, you're never going to have to worry about that. So this might be a good project for you to maybe cut your teeth on working with a natural fiber. This particular colorway is called Dark Gray Mist. And I have another example of what this yarn looks like. It's in a different colorway. This one is what they refer to as Meadow. But it's this lovely kind of dark sagey green. And you're going to use the full skein. So the full 100 grams of yarn here is exactly what you're going to need to complete the dimensions of the piece that I give you today. Now, in terms of the edging and the heart motif yarn, you're going to want to use a sock weight yarn or a fine yarn or a super fine yarn, or even possibly crochet thread. If you have maybe a crochet thread, that's going to work out just fine too, as long as it's a fine weight yarn. Now, for this particular colorway, I happen to use a sock yarn, hand dyed by Melissa's Yarn Barn. And here you can see how you can contact her if you're interested in seeing what else she has to offer. She also has an Etsy store from where I purchased this from. And the name of this colorway is Altar of Roses. And just to give you a look at that, this is what it looks like wound into a cake. It's just beautiful. And it worked up just beautifully as well. But again, you don't have to have this particular yarn. You can use any yarn you like that actually fits the parameters of the yarn weight that you need for this particular project. Also, the next thing I used, which of course is completely optional, is this crochet thread. This crochet thread is a Lydia's crochet thread size 10. I believe this one is their rose color. And this is the one I chose to use for this little chain outline on these hearts. However, this is completely optional. You don't need to do it if you don't want to. It looks beautiful without it as well. It really just depends on the look you're trying to achieve. Now, in terms of the envelope itself, I will be using a size G or a 4mm hook. For the Lacey motif, I will be using a 2.75mm hook, or also known as a size C hook. I will also need a pair of scissors and a tapestry needle. If you need an option like maybe beads that you saw that I put on the back at the ends of the laces, that's fine. You can do that. It's not necessary. It's not required. Okay, so let's start this video out with the little heart motif in the round. It's a classic Lacey motif, and I'm going to show you how that's done right now. So basically, I'm going to start with my yarn, my fine sock yarn, basically a weight 1 or a weight 2, and then my size C, or rather 2.75mm hook. And I'm going to start with a chain of 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going to join my chain to create a circle. Next, I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to make one more additional chain. So I guess technically 4. And then I'm going to double crochet right into that ring. And then I'm going to chain 1. So this double crochet plus chain 1, I'm going to do that a total of 11 times. So I'm going to make myself a repeat of what I just did 10 more times. And that will give me a total of 12 chain 1 spaces. So let me go ahead, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, chain 1. Okay, so you can see that so far I have 11 one chain spaces. And then my last chain here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to join right here in the 3rd chain of the very first 3 chain stitch. And by making that join, that gives me my 12th one chain space. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this so far. A bit of a wagon wheel with spokes. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch right into that one chain space. So it just takes a single slip stitch. Then I'm going to chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. And this chain 3 is going to be a stand-in for my first double crochet. Next, I'm going to place a double crochet again into that same one chain space. And then I'm going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. In the next one chain space, I'm going to place 2 double crochets. And then I'm going to chain 3. Again, in the next one chain space, I'm going to place 2 double crochets. And then I'm going to chain 3. I'm going to continue that until I've completed the round. Now when I've completed that row, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to slip stitch right into the 3rd chain of that first 3 chain stitch of the row. And by closing it off, what I've created is a round 2 in fact, that will give you 24 double crochets and 12 3-chain spaces. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to slip stitch into this first chain 3 space. I'm going to make 2 slip stitches, and that should bring me near the center of that 3-chain space. And then I'm going to chain 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to place a single crochet into the next 3-chain space. And then again, I'm going to single chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to place a single crochet into the next 3-chain space. I'm going to continue that all the way around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when I've made my way all the way around, what I'm going to do is my last chain 5 that I just completed, I'm just going to simply slip stitch right there into where I began in this round and make the slip stitch. And then I'm going to slip stitch 3 more times. So 1, 2, and 3, and this brings me to the top of that chain 5 space. And then this time I'm going to chain 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I'm going to single crochet in the next 5-chain space. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to chain in the or single crochet rather in the next 5-chain space. And then continue that all the way around. Now, when you've gotten to your very last 7-chain stitch, you're going to go ahead and do the same thing. Going to go down here and just simply slip stitch into the last slip stitch from where we began this round. And then I'm going to slip stitch 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right up the side of that first 7-chain space. And now this is where we're going to start forming the heart. Okay, so in order to do that, you're going to want to chain 3. So 1, 2, and 3. And then you're going to make 4 double crochets into the same stitch. So I'm going to place my first double crochet right here into the same 4th slip stitch. So that'll be 1, because that first 3-chain stitch is going to be a stand-in for my first double crochet. And we're going to have 2, 3, and then the 4th double crochet that I make, but now I have 5, for all intents purposes, double crochet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is going to be the first half of my heart. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to go to the next 7-chain space. And what I'm going to do is it's going to be that 4th chain that I'm going to place my double crochets into. So I'm going to place 5 double crochets into that 4th chain of the next 7-chain space. Just like that. Then I'm going to chain 2, and I'm going to place 5 double crochets into the next of the 7-chain space right there in that 4th chain. I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to continue that all the way around. Then when you've completed that last cluster of 5 double crochets, you're going to go ahead again, chain 2, and then slip stitch right into the next third chain of that first stitch. Now we're going to work the last and final round, and this round is going to be the lobes of our heart. So I'm going to begin that by making a chain of 3, 3, and then I'm going to place a double crochet into the next double crochet, and then I'm going to place a double crochet into the double crochet after that. Then I'm going to chain 3, and I'm going to slip stitch in that same stitch, in that same space. Then I'm going to chain 3 again, 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to double crochet into the next stitch. And then I'm going to double crochet into the stitch after that. And then I'm going to chain 3. And I'm going to slip stitch into the same stitch. So now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to chain 2 again, 1 and 2, and I'm going to slip stitch right here into this first double crochet. And then I'm going to begin the process all over again. I'm going to chain 3, and I'm going to double crochet into the next double crochet. And then I'm going to double crochet into the double crochet after that. And then I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to place a slip stitch into that same stitch. Then I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. Then I'm going to double crochet into the next stitch. And then I'm going to double crochet into the next stitch after that. Then I'm going to chain 3. And then I'm going to slip stitch into the same stitch as my last double crochet. And then, of course, as before, I'm going to chain 2, and then I'm going to slip stitch into that next double crochet. So now once I've gone all the way around and I've just completed my last 2 single chains, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slip stitch, and I'm going to leave myself a nice long tail for sewing. And then when it gets time in this tutorial to construct our book sleeve, then I'll explain more of what needs to be done after that. Now for the instructions of this piece today, I'm going to start off by showing you the 4-row repeat using this basic acrylic yarn from Lion Brand. And then also I'll show you the edging using the sock yarn from Melissa's Yarn. So let's get started with that. Okay, so I'm going to begin with this 4-weight yarn. And this background fabric is really made from an easy 4-row repeat. Now to begin with, I'm going to want to make as many chains as I need to. So for example, for this piece, I'm going to chain 41 chains. For those of you who may find it a little difficult to know what the correct gauge should be, you know, because we all crochet differently, right? The measurements are going to basically be, for this size, if this is the size you're going off of, is going to be 17 inches by 11 inches. And that's approximate, give or take. You don't have to get too hung up on exact dimensions. And in fact, if you're using a lighter weight yarn, let's say you decide to use a DK yarn, just go ahead and chain as many chains as you need to create a 17-inch length. Same with a chunky yarn. If you decided you want your book sleeve to be made from chunky yarn, just go ahead, using the appropriate size hook, of course, chain as many chains as you need to make, or as few, whichever the case may be, but that you need to make to create 17 inches of chain. Now for this particular demonstration, I am only going to chain 20 chains, just because I'm going to only show you the 4-row repeat and let you go ahead and run with that to the length and width that happens to work for you. So basically, as usual, you're just going to make your chain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can start, basically, we're going to do a row of single crochets. And you can do this any way you want. Some people prefer to do their single crochet off the foundation chain in this back hump. Others choose to do it in the top loop. Others choose to do it in the front and back loop right here. It really is up to you. It isn't going to matter one way or another, with exception to preference. So I'm going to begin by placing my single crochet in each chain. So I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to place a single crochet into that next chain, and then I'm going to continue to place a single crochet into each chain after that. So I have my single crochets. My piece looks like this. Yours should look similar. Next, I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to chain 1. Now for this particular piece, you are going to want to do your first single crochet in the turning stitch, right? So I'm going to put my first single crochet there. And this is the beginning of row 2. And then I'm going to put my next single crochet into the next single crochet. So now that I have 2 single crochets, what I want to do is I want to chain 2. So I'm going to have 1 and 2. And then I'm going to single crochet in the next stitch. And I'm going to single crochet in the stitch after that. And then again, I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2. And then I'm going to single crochet in the next stitch. And I'm going to single crochet in the next stitch after that. And I'm going to continue that for the length of the work. So again, I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to single crochet 2. I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to single. Okay, now I've come to the end of my row, and depending on what your count was, things might look slightly different, but they all kind of work out to be the same in the end. So for me, I have 2 stitches left. You may have 1 stitch left. You may have 3 stitches left. Regardless, just continue just as before. So I'm going to go ahead at this point and I'm going to chain 2, and then I'm going to single crochet 2. And then of course I've come to the end of my piece, end of my row. And this may be a little, as mentioned before, this may be a little different for you depending on how your count ended. And then I'm just going to simply turn my work. I'm going to chain 1, and I am going to begin my row 3. Now for row 3, basically what I want to do is I want to single crochet in each single crochet. So I'm going to go ahead again, begin in that first single crochet, that turning stitch, and then I'm going to single crochet in the next single crochet. Then I'm going to ignore this chain 2, and I'm going to go ahead and I am going to make my single crochet in the next single crochet, and then of course single crochet in the single crochet after that. I'm going to ignore this chain 2, and I'm going to continue just as before, making my single crochets in each single crochet. And I'm going to continue that until my row 3 is complete. Okay, so now I have single crochets for my row 3. I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to chain 1. Now you can already see the little nubs starting to take shape. So next what we want to do is we want to stagger these little nubs. So when I turn my work and I begin, I basically have 2 single crochets before I align with the nub, the first nub, but I want to stagger. So in this particular situation, I'm going to place my single crochet into my first stitch, and then I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2. And then I'm going to single crochet once and then single crochet twice. Then I'm going to chain 2, and then I'm going to single crochet once and then single crochet twice. And as you can see, my single crochets sit on either side of the nub below it. And here, same thing, but the new nubs end up being right between the other previously made nubs. And that will be more visible when we come back for our 5th row. But right now we're just working on the 3rd or 4th row. And then again, at this point, I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to make 1 single crochet and then a 2nd single crochet. Chain 2. 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, and then a chain 2. I'm going to continue this all the way until I've completed the row 4. And then when I've reached the end of my row 4, I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to place a single crochet in each single crochet across row 5. So that'll be my first single crochet, and then I'm going to ignore the next 2 stitches. And I'm going to place my next 2 single crochets in their respective stitches. And then, of course, continue by ignoring those 2 chain stitches and then placing my single crochet in each of the next single crochets. So now I think you can see how this is working out. And this is going to be how you're going to stagger your nubs through the length of your work. So now this is what I have, because you're going to continue your work by repeating rows 2 through 5. So rows 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to be your 4 rows that you're going to repeat until you've gotten the length of fabric that you're ultimately after. Once you've gotten the length of fabric that works for you and your book sleeve, so if you're following directions for the book sleeve that I created, you are looking at basically 40 stitches by 88 rows. Okay, so this is basically where you are sitting at. Now, that's going to be pretty much total. So let me bring that back and be a little more specific. You are basically looking at 40 stitches by 82 rows. Now, the next 6 rows are going to be basically the formation of the flap in the back, where there's a nice little rounded edge to that fold over flap of the envelope. And I'm going to pretend like I've got the length of fabric that I need, and I'm going to show you how to do that little rounded flap right here, right now. Okay, so we're going to pretend that I've completed my 82 rows, and now I'm going to finish up my last 6 rows, and I'm going to begin by beginning with my flap. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to chain 1. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to single crochet my 2 single crochets together. And in this case, it happens to land just above the nub. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to begin my first single crochet, and then I'm going to begin my second single crochet and yarn over. I'm going to pull that yarn through both of those to create just the 1 stitch. So basically I've decreased my single crochet, and now I'm in a position where I need to chain 2, 1, 2, and then I'm going to single crochet in the next single crochet. And basically I'm going to continue the pattern just as before until I get to the last 2 stitches. Okay, so now I'm at my last 2 single crochets. And for me, these are my last 2. For you, you know, things might land a little differently, but I think by now you get the gist. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, and in my case, I'm going to chain my 2. And then I'm going to single crochet my last 2 stitches together to create that decrease. Then I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to chain 1. Now, even on my way back, so we just completed the first row of the flap, and we're going to move to the second row of the flap, and I'm going to begin that by again decreasing. So I'm going to begin in my first single crochet, and then I'm going to go through and begin another stitch in my second single crochet, yarn over. I'm going to pull that through all those to create my decrease. And then just as before, being on the back of my work, I am simply going to place a single crochet in each of the single crochets until I hit those last 2 single crochet stitches for this row 2. Okay, so now you can see I'm at my last 2 stitches for row 2. I've got a single crochet here and then the 2 chain and then a single crochet here. So I'm just going to work around that to create a decrease, just like before. You see I got my 3 loops on the hook, and now I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to decrease those last 2 single crochets. And then I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to chain 1, and now I'm ready to start my 3rd row. Now for the 3rd row, it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to place a decrease on either end of the row. And for row 3, I'm going to start just as before. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my first 2 stitches, my first 2 single crochets into a decrease. And then I'm going to continue just as before. So my next stitch needs to be a single crochet, and then I'm going to chain 2. And then of course, so on and so forth, single crochet, and then 2 chains. And these are my last 2 stitches of the 3rd row. I'm going to turn my work, I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to continue row 4 just as before for the back of the row. And then of course, once you get to the end of row 4, you're going to turn your work. I'm going to begin row 5 with a chain 1. And then again, of course, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to decrease. And I'm going to begin as usual as I continue to complete row 5 until the last 2 single crochets, at which time I'm going to decrease again. Then for row 6, I'm going to turn my work, and this is going to be the final row. I'm going to chain. When I've completed this row 6, I am going to fasten off and weave in my end, and then I'm going to begin with the edging. So once you finish that, meet me back here for edging instructions. Okay, so once you've finished your entire swatch of material, basically, your flap should just have this nice little diagonal cut on the side just to give it that nice little clean envelope fold. Now, in terms of the trim that I did for this, it's just super basic. It's simply half double crochets, evenly crocheted around the entire piece of the work. So really, basically, you're just going to tie in. And you're going to start by making a chain 2. And then now, because I used a 4-weight yarn for the body of this envelope, I am going to, in each chain, I am going to place 2 half double crochets with this very fine yarn. And that will make a nice even fit across the open chain parts of your work. So you can see how evenly and well 2 half double crochets in each of the chains work. So that gives you a nice even trim. Now, when you're working on the raw edges, it's basically a really similar thing, except for the corner. You might want to throw 1 or 2 more half double crochets into that corner just to help it round the edge nicely. But otherwise, what you're going to do after that is you're basically going to place 2 half double crochets into each row. And that will help you get a nice even run of double crochets right down the raw edging sides of your work. And so you can kind of see how it's working out here, just like that. Now go ahead and finish the edging on your sleeve fabric. And then when we come back here, I'm going to pick up with the rest of the instructions, working on the original piece I just showed you, working on the original sleeve that you see in the image at the beginning of this video. So now that I have my swatch finished along with my edging, I'm now going to go here at the top part of my flap area, and I'm going to measure down about 5 inches. And from there, I'm going to place a stitch marker on each side of that row. Next, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to flip my work over, and then I'm going to bring up the bottom corners to exactly where that stitch marker sits. And I'm going to connect the end of this corner right here with the place where I had the stitch marker marked. And I'm going to do that exact same process on the other side of my work. Okay, so you can see I've got the pouch part of my envelope marked out. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to where I see basically the front facing part of the pouch, the side of the pouch where I'm going to actually have my motif at, and I'm going to go to the corner. And this is where I'm going to tie in right here at this corner, and I'm going to start single crocheting a reverse single crochet or cat crab stitch, depending on what you prefer to call this stitch. So I'm going to stitch it just like that, these 2 sides together. So I'm going to sandwich these 2 sides together, and I'm going to start that stitch. Of course, I'll be using the same yarn that I chose to trim out my piece with. I'm going to come down here to the corner. I'm going to tie that in. And then I'm going to do a reverse single crochet. Now, for those of you who don't know what a reverse single crochet is, it's basically just what it sounds like. So I'm going to take my hook, and instead of going right, I'm going to come back left. That's if I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you're going to want to go in the rightwardly direction. And I'm going to insert my hook. I'm going to pick up some yarn. In this case, it's kind of like a yarn under. And I'm going to pull that yarn through, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull that yarn through. That's my reverse single crochet. So again, I'm going to insert it into those 2 layers of stitches. I'm going to yarn under and pull that through, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull that yarn through. And I'm going to continue doing this all the way around. So I'm going to follow this edging, and then when I get to my stitch marker, I'm going to remove my stitch marker, but I'm going to continue on the single layer of edging all the way around until I get to my next stitch marker. At this point, I will sandwich my 2 pieces together again, and I will complete my reverse single crochet all the way down the end to the corner of the piece, at which time I will fasten off and weave in my tail. So now that we have the edges all completely crocheted together and we have a nice pouch, it's probably a good time to go ahead and decide exactly where you'd like to have your motif. I want to have my motif right in the center. Your possibilities are only limited by your imagination or your taste as to where you think your motif is going to look best. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the long tail that I had left, and I'm going to use this to sew my motif on. And if I need to get some more yarn to complete the sewing process because maybe I didn't have enough yarn to begin with, that's okay. That's what I'm going to do at this point. So now we're at the optional aspect of this Valentine's book envelope. And as you saw earlier, I had combined my motif with the front of this envelope. And now what I want to do is I want to bring the hearts out just a little bit more. So what I do is I basically just embroider a basic chain stitch around each heart. And I'll show you how I do that right here with this last open heart that I have. Now this is completely optional. You may like this without the embroidered chain stitch around the heart. Either way you choose to do it is perfectly okay. It's all about your personal taste and how you want to approach it. So basically, I've taken my crochet thread, which is just a basic number 10 crochet thread, Aunt Lydia's. I believe this is the rose colorway. And I've brought my thread through. And then what I do is to make a chain, I just simply pull my yarn up a little bit, and I take my needle and I insert it into or near the same hole as what I had pulled the thread through. And then I just pick up a little bit of that fabric right there that you can see, and then I pull the needle through using it to catch the loop. And then that's my next chain. And I'll continue to chain stitch just like that all the way around. So as you can see, I started at the bottom point of the heart and I brought my chain stitches up and around that first lobe. And then I brought it right back here into the cleft of the heart. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and on the other side of that chain, right here, I'm going to insert my hook. I'm going to weave it through the fabric so that you don't see the thread peeking through, and it doesn't show from the inside or behind the fabric either. So we're just going to bring it right through. And then I'm just going to just pull it, just tug it just a little bit. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start the chaining up the opposite side. This approach ensures that my chains appear to be going in the same direction, beginning at the same point and meeting at the same point. And that's all there is to it. And then this is the look that you get, or something similar to it, when you've completed that. Now let's move along to the back of the piece where we have our flap. And I'm going to discuss the different ways you can choose to close this flap. So there are the magnetic snaps that you might get as a part for a purse. You can certainly attach those so that this just magnetically closes. You can tie a ribbon around the whole thing and just tie it in a bow. Or you can do what I'm going to do here, and that is I'm going to combine a kind of cording that we just simply make with our crochet hook. And it's basically a chaining technique, but it's more than that. And I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. And what that'll give us is that'll give us lacing or cording that we can just tie at each spot that we put our two coupled cordings together, that we can just tie the flap close. And I think that'll make it accessible for anyone who happens to have the yarn to make this project, but maybe not the extra little notions or findings that would allow you to close it in a different fashion. So now, as you can see here, I've already put 3 of my cordings on. I've already attached them. And it's not quite your basic chain stitch, but I am going to show you how to make this kind of cording. Some people call it basically an I-cord. I don't know that I would call it a traditional I-cord, but it is a kind of I-cord. But regardless the name, it really is quite a handy cording stitch, and I'm going to show you how I do that next. Now for my first step, I'm going to actually cut a length of yarn or crochet thread or whatever you happen to be using. If you're using the yarn or the crochet thread, and when I say yarn, I mean this fine weight yarn like a sock yarn, you're going to measure out approximately 68 inches. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to fold it in half. So this is where I've folded my yarns in half, and now it's like I have 2 strands of yarn where they terminate at an end that I've folded in half. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just figure out where I want to place my yarn, because you may decide that you want to place your yarn somewhere a little different on your pouch. So you can see where I placed my yarn here and here so that I could tie my flap close. And then of course here, this cording right here, I placed my yarn in the same position but just on the opposite side of here. So I'm basically going to do the same thing with that for the top flap, and I'm going to show you how I make this cording from the top flap. So now I'm going to decide exactly where I need to go in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my hook right here. I'm going to hook right under where the lip of that dark gray yarn ends. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hook that loop, and I'm going to pull it through, and I'm going to make my slip stitch. I'm going to join it, and then I'm going to go into that same stitch, that same area where I stitched from before, and I'm actually going to make a single crochet. And in this particular situation, this is just where I'm anchoring it in and how I'm anchoring it in. If I just wanted to make a loose cording that wasn't anchored in, I would start this process off slightly different. But we're not going to get into that today. I'm just simply going to show you how to make the cording once you've anchored it into the appropriate location. So now, as you can see, I've got 2 long tails. And one tail I am going to wrap around my hand like I normally would, just to maintain the tension. And the other tail I'm going to leave a little loose, but I'm going to pretty much clasp with my middle finger and my thumb. And then once I've decided that I'm ready to go, what I do is I take the yarn that is clasped between my thumb and my middle finger, and I yarn over my hook. And then I pull it back with a little bit of tension. And then I yarn over again with my other yarn, and I pull it on through. So with my first yarn, my first tail between my thumb and my middle finger, I yarn over and I hold it in place. And then I yarn over again with my other tail. And then I use that loop and pull it through. So I'll show you a few more times and go just a little faster so you can kind of see the movement. Now, if the technique feels a little fiddly to you, don't worry, just keep at it. It'll become more natural as you move along. And that's really all there is to it. And you will continue like this until you come to an end of your yarn. And depending on how you folded your yarn in half, you might have a little extra tail left on one strand of yarn over the other, and that's fine. And just cut off the excess when you've fastened off your cording, or rather the tails to your cording. Okay, so now once I've finished my cording, as you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just knot this end off. Now I can leave it like this, which is fine, or I can maybe add a bead to the end or any other embellishment I'd like. I'm going to actually go ahead and add some matching beads to the ends of these just to add a little extra bling to the piece, but otherwise it really is an optional move in terms of the bead. You really just need your cording. And then of course, once your cording is completed, you have yourself some decent ties. That you can tie your flap shut with. Just like so. And that's it. Now you have a wonderfully completed book, Lover's Valentine. Perfect way to go ahead and protect whatever book you happen to be reading, especially if you're going to toss it into a backpack, or you want to kind of keep an eye on it, or you want to throw it into your purse. This is a great way to protect your book from just getting mushed or masked or messed up in some way or another. And it's also a great way to show the book lover in your life, whether that's you or somebody else, that you certainly appreciate them by giving them a gift that they'll actually like and use.